Hello everyone. In this section, section 8.5, we're going to be talking about annuities, methods of saving, and investments. Pretty big topic. We will just scratch the surface of it barely. This is definitely a topic that you need to do some research on your own, and hopefully you have some things going already. But to be honest, not a lot of people spend time on this and consider this and do the tough thing and put money towards the future. And so that's kind of our subtitle here, Saving for Your Future and the Future of Your Family. That's biblical. You need to prepare for the future for your family while you're here and while you're gone. And after you're gone, I mean. So we're going to talk a little bit about these things within this section. This section doesn't go real deep, but we'll look at what we have here. And so investments is what we're talking about in this section. One of the main investments, actually, before I go there, one of the main investments that it discusses is annuities. And there is a video after this one that talks specifically about calculating annuities. And so that is kind of the heavy math portion of the homework. The homework in this section, I believe, is relatively short, but the math part of it is plugging into that annuities formula. And so there's a separate video on that. This portion of the section, we're talking about stocks as an option for investments. Stocks, you have to be a little bit careful with because if you invest in one stock or a particular stock, then that is a little more risky in terms of how well that company does. And again, I don't want to say it's gambling, but you certainly need to know about the company, and you are risking money here. We've had some great fortune with that. I've been very blessed with that process, and I'll talk about that when we talk about one of the other topics here. Part of the homework for this section is reading stock tables, and that's a little confusing. And you have to know what a lot of vocabulary terms and acronyms and so on stand for. And so rather than me covering all those things within this video, what I'd really like you to do is look at pages 530 and 531 in your book and go over those pieces of information in there and have that as a resource maybe open in one tab while you're working on a couple of the homework questions in another tab, so you can go back and forth and use that as a reference. Stocks can be highly volatile. They can pay off really well for you. They're also typically a long-term investment that you want to be in. And so just lots of variations there. So bonds is another option. Bonds are ways of essentially you investing in a bond that loans money to companies, governments, those kinds of things. Typical bond would be like a municipal bond, treasury bond, those types of things. Well, in fact, that's kind of the example that goes with the stock. So just a personal example here. My mother purchased U.S. savings bonds for my children when they were born, and like every birthday, when they were little. And very awesome of her. It was a massive blessing. She just wanted to bless them, and so she would buy like $100 EE savings bonds, $500. I think there might have even been a $1,000 one in there at one time. And what happens with those is that you buy them at half their face value, and then they earn interest for a 10-year period until they mature, it's called, and then they're worth that face value. And so she purchased all those, and then they go up in value based on a chart and so on. Well, when she passed away and left those for my children, we looked at those, and they don't pay a very high rate. It's a pretty slow process of getting there. And so we took a little bit of a chance, and we cashed those in at the rates that they were at then. And then we invested in Apple stock. I've always been an Apple guy. It's always been something that has gone up and so on. God just blessed that bountifully. And so my children ended up paying for their college educations. They purchased vehicles when they became aged of driving. They purchased their first computers for school. Yeah. And so those ended up paying off very, very well. And so, that's a good story, but it doesn't always turn out that way. And so, Apple stock at the time was a great investment. We've had some of those, Google and Amazon and so on. But you just definitely need to be careful there. And in that time period, they definitely paid off higher than a bond rate. But a bond could be a great long-term investment as well. There are mutual funds as well. And so I'm invested in a mutual fund that is essentially a diversified portfolio of multiple stocks. And typically a mutual fund is run by a fund advisor. That fund advisor is either a person, not typically a person, but a group of people that determine what stocks and other things that they're going to invest in. And then it's just kind of one big pot. And those can pay off very well. I believe my mutual fund in the last year, I believe, made around 13.5%. So that's been great. And so again, it's like a lot of these other things. There are bunches of mutual funds that you need to research and find that will work for you. And there are different ones based on if you want to be real aggressive, if you want to be conservative and make sure that it's a kind of a slow growth over time. There's different types. And so again, you can research those, but that's what a mutual fund is a bunch of stocks or a bunch of investments kind of put into one folder, and your money just goes with that. And so retirement savings, obviously you need to save up for retirement. It would be best if you did not count on Social Security for that. Who knows if that will be around. And there are different kinds of retirement savings. You can do an individual retirement savings account, which is referred to usually as an IRA. And what that means is that you would set aside a certain amount each month or each paycheck into that IRA account. And it is essentially tax-free money now. It goes out before taxes, and then it's taxed later when you turn 60 or 65 or whatever, whenever you're going to retire, start drawing that money. Then it's taxed at that rate, which is maybe not the best because we all know taxes just go up. And so by the time you retire, who knows what the tax rate is going to be, but that's a typical scenario for that. Okay, so you can decide on that compared to a Roth IRA or a Roth IRA, and that's taxed at today's rate. And so that money is taxed now, and then when you withdraw it month by month or whatever you're going to do when you retire, then it's already been taxed, and so you just get the full amount that you would take each month. And so there's a couple different choices there. And then, of course, typical employer sponsored retirement plans, typically called a 401k. If you happen to be going to teaching, there's the State Teacher Retirement System, or STRS. There's just different ones. Classified employees have PERS, Public Employees Retirement System. There's just lots of them. And if you work for a private employer, I know my son just started a job at the beginning of January, and he had to go over all the 401k options that he had and so on. And so he's investing in that retirement plan at, he just turned 22. And so he is investing in his retirement now. And that's something actually that we want to talk about when we're talking about retirement savings. So just before this video, in the page of videos, there was a PDF. There was a link for a PDF, and I'm hoping that you clicked on that and downloaded that. You can either look at it on your screen while we're talking about this, off to the side of maybe the video or whatever, or it'd be great if you printed it and looked at it there and maybe made some notes on it. But I'm going to pull that up here. And so this is that PDF, and what I really want you to look at here is we're comparing two different individuals, two people that are investing and saving for retirement. So we're going to look at individual A first. And honestly, I'll use my son as an example of this because he's pretty close to this age. And so again, in January, he just turned 22. And in January, he started investing in his 401k plan. And so if you look at this, and I believe this is based on a 10% return, which is a little bit high. But again, mutual funds that I'm invested in are doing that and a little bit more. And so it's not impossible, but maybe a little bit unique. I don't know. But this is based on a 10% return over time. And so if you were to invest, this is an annual investment. So if you were to invest $1,000 a year, and so what is that? If you divide that by 12, that's about $80 a month. And so if you started at age 21 by putting $80 a month away into a retirement system that is paying 10% interest over that time period, and then compounds and so on, then this is the kind of the growth table for it. So at 22, you put another $1,000 in there. At 23, you put another $1,000. And actually it would grow faster than this because this is a simple interest and only compounded at the end of the year, which no investment works like that. So this is way slower than what it would really be. But look at the table. So that person will invest for each of the first 8 years of their working career. And then for whatever reasons, they just stopped in this table. So at age 29, they didn't put in anything at age 29. They didn't put anything until the rest of their career. And so they just invested $80 a month for the first 8 years. But here's where compounding interest comes into play. The time frame that money is compounding on itself, earning interest on the interest, it just stays in there and keeps compounding. It continues to grow. So those next, whatever that is, 28 to 65, what is that, 57, or to 58, so 37 years, the next 37 years, that doesn't sound right. It is, yeah, 37 years. They put in no money into their retirement, right? And that total investment of $8,000 then, $1,000 a year for the first 8 years, is all they put into that. And look at the value of that account. And again, not compounded very well, and this table's not great in terms of the actual compounding that would work. But they have a retirement with $427,000 in it because of that compounding factor that's going on there. Now let's compare that to B, individual B. So they got a little bit later start in life, okay? Still not a terrible thing. Okay, you still need to invest, and you'll see that it's not incredibly different, but it certainly helps to start early. And so the lesson there is that you start as soon as you possibly can. And so instead, this person started at age 29 and started putting $1,000 a month away. I mean, $1,000 a year, which again is $80 a month or so, and did that every year until age 65. And so they did that for essentially those 37 years. And so that investment over time, because they did it at the kind of second part, or however you want to look at that total investment was $37,000. So they invested quite a bit more than the first person, okay? Nearly 5 times as much that they invested, but still not a terribly high amount. And that account will then be worth $363,000. So about, what, $64,000 less than the other one. So not a terrible difference there. That's what I mean. You need to get started as soon as possible on this. The youngest age you possibly can, start investing in this retirement system. Okay? Whatever it may be. These are certainly well below the maximums that you can put into those retirement systems. Okay? Roth, IRA, those different kinds of things. And the maximums change all the time, so I don't know exactly what they are. But they're much higher than this. And so you need to start putting that money away. You know, some people might argue back and forth with this a little bit, but what I've told my son in terms of investing in that, so if he starts now at age 22 and starts putting that money away, you know, he'll continue to do it. He's not going to stop at 28. He'll continue to do it, but when he's, say, 50 or so, and has done that for all those years, somewhere in that range, 55, if he's ready to retire, he has choices in life at that time. He can retire. Whereas if you have not put that investment away, you don't have that choice. You can't afford to live on nothing because you can't draw Social Security at that age and so on. So you just don't have as many choices as you have when you have put that money away and so on. And so something to consider, something to think about. Your action step here is to start putting your money away in a retirement system. It does not have to be a huge amount each month. You just need to start doing it as soon as possible because of this compounding factor that's going on here. Okay? So this homework for this section is a little bit different maybe. Some of the questions are more like general knowledge questions from a little bit of what we talked about here and just what stocks are and so on. Some of them are very specific with that annuity video that you need to look at and plugging into that formula. You need to get used to that formula because we're using it in the next section as well. And then those terms and acronyms and so on for reading a stock table. And so you need to be able to do those types of things within this week's homework. So a little bit kind of spread out homework here in terms of the topics. But definitely a good topic here to know about.